Welcome to Book Club with Jeffrey Sachs. I'm absolutely thrilled to have with us today the author Dennis Fritz, who has written an extraordinarily important book and very timely book called Deadly Betrayal. It's the story of why the United States invaded Iraq in 2003. It's important history, but it's also current events because we have a war raging in the Middle East right now where there are so many echoes with what Dennis Fritz reports in Deadly Betrayal. Now, Dennis Fritz is a command chief, retired of the U.S. Air Force. He's had many commands, an absolutely fascinating career. So, Commander, Chief Fritz, Dennis, if I may,
please do.
As retired and author on the book club, I'm so thrilled to be together with you, and it's an honor. You've served the United States magnificently, and you've written a very, very important book for all of us to understand some truths about our foreign policy and about our ways of war. I'd be grateful if you could introduce yourself to this worldwide audience, explaining what roles you played in the U.S. Air Force and how you came to write this book.
First of all, Jeff, thank you so much for having me. I mean, the respect is mutual. I've been following you for years, and so I'm just thrilled and honored to be a part of your book club podcast. So thank you so much for that. I will tell you, I spent some 28 years in the United States Air Force. I will say a fairy tale career for an enlisted person. My last 10 years is probably what I would really focus on, where I was a senior advisor to 4-star commanders in the Pacific Air Force's Space Command, which had a nuclear arsenal at the time. And our satellites that are circling the world right now, which created, Space Command created now the Space Force because of all the, weaponry, unfortunately, that we have in space now. And also, I was as an additional duty, I was a senior enlisted advisor to the commander of NORAD, our aerospace defense command.
Amazing. You saw everything.
I had an opportunity to see everything, not only from an operational standpoint and from being in the field at major headquarters, but also I spent a lot of my time in the Pentagon as well, working within the Secretary of the Air Force's office and the Chief of Staff's, one of the organizations there, what we call the Air Staff. And so, I've had a blessed career. And in fact, I cultivated my career as being the command chief of Andrews Air Force Base, home of Air Force One, where I had the honor to be able to fly on Air Force One. And in fact, if we step back a little bit, I had opportunity to fly with President Bush as we were going out to visit some troops just before they were deploying to Afghanistan. Now, Jeff, as we said,
that is an amazing career, and as an American, let me thank you for it. First of all, that's a great service, and a great service. I may say, capped by this amazing story that you tell, and your perspectives, which I think are unique in that you know the command in the field all over the world, space, the Middle East, Asia, the United States, and U.S. foreign policy making from seeing it at the very top level of the U.S. government. It doesn't get higher than what you've seen.
Well, thank you. And with that said, I'll set the stage of how I came about writing the book. And in fact, as you will probably see in the book, I was at Andrews Air Force Base at the time, and 9/11 happened. And that was a scary moment, especially for us being in Washington, D.C. I know likewise for you all in New York, really, ground zero, and then being in Washington with the Pentagon being hit. I had a number of assignments at the Pentagon and friends there. And family there, in fact, at the Pentagon. And when that hit, that really, scared everyone throughout the world, and specifically in New York and Washington, D.C. Like everyone else, I was alarmed by that. I was mad. about, 9/11, not knowing, what happened and who had attacked us. And once we were told that it was done by bin Laden, like everyone else, I hate to say it, but I wanted revenge at the time, and the troops felt the same way. I always had a reputation of having credibility, if we say the troops in slang, language for the military men and women. And we were all geared up and say, hey, we have to go and quote, quote, defend our country. And so off we went to Afghanistan. And, that was happening in October of 2001. By December, we had allegedly defeated, the Taliban, and we had, interim government in place. But then all of a sudden, we started hearing about deploying to Iraq. And none of us understood that. Iraq.
When did you hear that first, actually?
We started hearing about that in early 2002.
Okay.
Taliban allegedly had been defeated, But now I'm going to go back, Jeff. Let me share something with you, and I'll get to that later, what I found out, though, about Iraq,
yes,
the planet of Iraq. But we, the troops in the field, we started hearing about it in 2002, started, seeing contingency orders and so forth and plans for going to Iraq. And none of us understood that. And my time at the time of, working with General Myers, both in Space Command and a couple of other assignments, members of my who had worked with me in Space Command was on General Myers' staff, who at the time went from being the vice chairman to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff during that time. So I reached out to some of them.
So you were advisor to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff?
No, I was not before he became the chairman.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, but I was still a confidant of his. We still communicated and had, breakfast and lunch, and his staff would call to me because two members who had worked with me on my staff in Space Command had worked for him. It was working for him at the time when he was the chairman. And so that was my connection, him continuously. And
amazing.
I reached out to them and said, hey, okay, what's going on here? Why are we going to Iraq? What entailed? Yeah, and
this was just out of the blue in a way. I mean, it
absolutely,
must have seemed absolutely strange to you, especially you had to implement suddenly another war. I mean, you were going to be engaged. Yeah.
Exactly. Where was this coming from? Why Iraq, And so that was something that bothered me. And I had no answer. Military men and women were coming to me, especially when they got the orders to deploy to Iraq. As a senior leader, myself and the commanders, we were always, it's called the deployment line, go out and see them off, and, give them the rah-rah speech, But it was bothering me because I just didn't believe, not knowing what was happening, I didn't believe, what did what did Iraq have to do with 9/11? And it bothered me. And I never thought I would ever know the reason why. And as I started sending troops off, to war, and I didn't know why I was doing that. On the enlisted side of the house, you can't resign, but if you're retirement eligible, you can retire. And I decided to retire. I just couldn't, just in my heart, send troops off to war to something I didn't truly believe in.
Wow.
And that bothered me.
Yeah, that shows the depth of the lack of explanation and clarity about this.
Absolutely. And especially when I had people on the joint staff who couldn't tell me why we were going. That really.
In other words, the top of the U.S. military could not explain what was going to be one of the major wars of the beginning of the 21st century. And they couldn't explain what was going on. And you were commanding troops at the time.
Exactly. And so that bothered me. And so, Jeff, I never thought I'll ever know the reason why. And then I call it divine intervention. I wanted to get away from the military so I can be an outspoken person, person that had, like as you mentioned earlier, has served, many commands, had been a leader for over, accumulated over 100,000, men and women, throughout my last 10 years of service.
Wow.
And, I wanted to get away so I can, just freely speak out against, my concerns about the Iraq war. It's been a military person for over 28 years. I tried civilian life. It just didn't work out for me. I had a great job, I thought, sitting on the Potomac, had a plush office sitting on the Potomac to look out and see the Potomac River. But it just didn't work out. It wasn't that military environment I was used to. I think I lasted 3 months, to be honest with you.
All right.
And so friends started saying, Fritz, your life is the military. I had an individual that was a good mentor of mine that lured me back to the Pentagon. And little did I know that divine intervention was, I will be working under a guy by the name of Doug Feith. who was the Undersecretary of Defense of Policy at the time, the number 3 guy in the Pentagon.
And by the way, as we come to that, it's a name that I think almost nobody knows in America, in the general public. Of course, people know him if they're involved in high foreign policy, but this is someone that, as you'll explain, played an enormous role in American policy and in the world, but basically almost unknown to the American public. So you're telling a story and talking about somebody who's just not known.
And Jeff, I'm so glad you said that. And that's why I dedicated a chapter to him, because at the time, I hate to be so candid, but he was probably the most dangerous person in government at the time and at the Pentagon. And that's why I call it divine intervention. How do I end up, working, under this individual? And, one of the first things when I arrived back to the Pentagon was, hey, folks were, behind the scenes talking about, the apolitical military individuals were talking, man, this guy's dangerous. Some were saying he was a liar, he was a crook. Wow. And I started doing, background. Who is this guy I'm working for now? Wow. And that's when I realized.
What year was that? Was that 2000?
That would have been 2000.
Still?
No. I retired in 2003. That would have been early 2005 then.
Okay. So the Iraq War, you
resigned. In the middle of the Iraq War.
The Iraq War came. We're occupying. We're fighting.
Exactly.
Soldiers are dying. They're being blown up by
IEDs, improvised explosive devices.
IED, exactly. And you're coming back now to the Pentagon, and you're assigned to dogfight. Very amazing.
Yeah. And so now, that's why I call it divine intervention. Now it's something I always wondered, why did we go to war? And now I'm stuck right in the middle of seeing these guys, executing this. Like I said, we're right in the middle of it right now.
Yeah.
But at that time, and you'll see in the we'll hopefully we'll get into that as well. Yep. I'm seeing that, we're in Iraq fighting, but let's jump back to Afghanistan. We're losing more troops in Afghanistan than we are in Iraq at the time, but the Bush administration was so focused on Iraq. Now, Jeff, I don't want to jump the gun on you and go into the other part of the story, but I just want to give you a couple of things. What made me write the book, and then, how do we got to where we are now? Because it does ties into what's happening in the world today.
Yeah.
Now, after being in OSD policy, which Doug Fife was running, I got selected to work on a team because of the fact, as you know, even back then, the controversy of the war at the time, it was under the disguise that, listen, we need to get ahead of what we call the freedom of information request, that historians, scholars like yourself, and the press will probably be seeking, information of, okay, why did we go to war? And so a team was created of 3 of us in the beginning. It was just 3 of us, and then Doug Fife, and then his special assistant, a guy by the name of Abe Shulsky, who a lot of folks never heard the name of.
No, I never heard of him until I read him in the book, but I saw what an amazing role he played as well.
Abe was, I would call it, Abe was a very intelligent guy. He was so quiet, but he was Doug Fife's brain.
Wow.
Yeah.
And basically a kind of PR for war.
Yeah, intelligence guy, PR guy for war. And he knew how to write some of the greatest papers, informative papers that was very convincing to Bush. And so, I mean, he was a great asset. A name, when you talk about Doug Fife, but Abe Shulsky is a name that you never, hear about. And so I would ask that, during some of your time, go back and do some research on Gabe.
Yep.
Because, Gabe was a very interesting individual. But as we created this team, I got to tell you, I was exposed, as you saw in the book, Daniel Ellsberg. I was the Daniel. I call myself the cowardly Daniel Ellsberg. And I say the cowardly.
I'm looking behind me on my bookshelf. Hold on.
Okay.
You'll see Secrets by Daniel Ellsberg. Because Dan Ellsberg. We'll get into this. I won't digress too long. Yeah. But I found him to be a hero for letting the public know about the Vietnam War and this remarkable fact that he had access to the background documents, the real documents that led us into the war and continued the U.S. engagement in what the insiders knew was an absolute disaster, but they just lied to the public during year after year after year. And Ellsberg, of course, exposed that in the so-called Pentagon Papers. And I was a kid in the 1960s, marching on the streets of Detroit as a high school student against the war. And when I got to Harvard College as a freshman in 1972, within the first couple of weeks, I met Dan Ellsberg in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I revered the guy and continued to. So I don't want to digress, but here's Ellsberg, and here is Dennis Fritz. And you had an amazing perch suddenly. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Tell us what this project on declassification review.
Well, and I will tell you, and that's why I call myself a cowardly Daniel Ellsberg. I had
A what?
A cowardly Daniel Ellsberg.
Cowardly?
Yes.
No. You are,
Yeah.
I mean, you're a truth teller, which is amazing and
Well,
wonderful.
yeah,
And
yeah.
we're grateful for that. But you found yourself in a symmetrical situation in a way.
Exactly. I was exposed and had access to any document that was created in advance of the Iraq War, all the pre-planning documents, all the personal papers. And how did that happen, Dennis Fritz? Well, one thing I will give Donald Rumsfeld, I was no fan of Donald Rumsfeld, as you saw in the book, but one thing about him, he believed in preserving official documents. He really, truly believed in that, in the National Archives. I would give him that. And so any meetings they had, any discussions they had, he wanted it documented. Why? Because if he forgot anything or if anybody forgot it, he had documentation. The other thing, in case he wanted to rewrite something, he had the original document. And so, one of my colleagues said, hey, I'm not going to repeat what they say. It's got to be one of the effest, stupidest people in the world. They left everything, paper trail. But that was good for me,
Yeah. But what an amazing thing, by the way. I guess if you want to rewrite history, you have to write history first. So they left the paper trail.
They left the paper trail. And little did they know, a Dennis Fritz would come along, interested in that paper trail,
Yeah.
And as I started seeing the lies, that I saw and just the way they went out to change intel, to their liking to justify, going to war. And I got to tell you, Jeff, they never knew if Saddam had WMD, but they were hoping.
Weapons of mass destruction for everybody
weapons of mass
listening.
destruction.
Yep.
Yes. They were hoping that he had weapons of mass destruction to justify them going to war. And so they were, as you heard the term, cherry picking intel.
Yeah.
That's what they were doing. They were cherry picking him to justify, even though you had the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, and the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, the military arm of intelligence, telling them, we don't have no proof of him having WMD, and if he does, we don't know where they are. That's what the official...
the way that you depict it is that they landed on WMD as their go-to explanation for why we should go to war. But even that was concocted. It wasn't that they knew or didn't know. They needed to find some way to tell the public why we wanted to go to war.
Wow. Jeff, I tell you, boy, I wish we had more time. We're going to digress back to that. So let's get this one first.
Yeah,
I had it.
Sure.
I was exposed to every document that existed. Okay, I had access to all the systems and everything. I had to have some of the highest security clearances, and then from security clearances we go to access. I had special access to all the documents. Now, why do I say that? Coming in January of 2001, you had people like Paul Wolfowitz, Richard Hurl, who was part of what we call the Defense Policy Board. That's like a volunteer board that advised the Secretary of Defense. And Doug Feith. They were set on going after Saddam from day one of their Bush administration. The problem, though, they had no justification or excuse to go to war at the time.
They had to launch an unprovoked war completely out of American supposed tradition and international law, they had to provoke a war, and they were determined to do so.
They were determined to do so. Even fabrications of, we have what you call, and I don't want to get too deep in this for the audience, but we have what we call Northern Watch and Southern Watch. They came about after the first war with Saddam, when we went in to remove him out of Kuwait. Mm-hmm. And so from that, we had two military operations: Southern Watch to protect the Shia community, and then the Northern Watch to support and to defend the Turks in northern Iraq.
Okay.
And so, in order to try to provoke Saddam, we had overflight where we would not allow any of his helicopters to get up in the air. We were even going to fabricate a story where Saddam shot at one of our aircraft to provoke him to going to war. We were trying to come up with all kind of excuses. Okay, how could we provoke him, as you stated? But they couldn't come up with anything. Now, what I'm about to say, as I tell folks, I can give you facts, I can give you assumptions, and I can give you opinions. As you know, there's all kind of conspiracy theories. Oh, it was an inside job and all that. Well, no, I don't follow that. I only go by what I know. But just, unfortunately, this is a fact here. I can tell you, after 9/11 happened, there were some in the Bush administration were happy. Yeah. And why were they happy?
Yep. We
because
made
they
it.
gave them. We made
We
it.
got it.
We have our excuse to go to war with Saddam now. We created the war on terror because of the fact we knew we could scare the American people to death of another 9/11 happening. Why? Why will not the American people support us now in going to war? Now, they picked Iraq first because under the old Clinton administration, they had what you call a regime policy change. Now, how do we, Americans, how do we dictate we're going to change the regimes of other countries? But they had a regime, and they talked Clinton into doing that, but he never executed that. So they felt that gave them justification. So the reason they started with Iraq first was because of the fact that he was paying the families of so-called terrorists, that was, bombing, with bombs in Israel. So they felt they could justify by going after him and saying that he had WMD to scare the American people because after 9/11. So you have a
right. And I was just reminded by the book. I don't know if I ever really knew it. The Iraq Liberation Act of 1998. Before all of this happens, there is signed into law. Into law.
That was during the Clinton administration.
The overthrow of the Iraq government.
Exactly. Regime change policy. And we were paying money to do that.
But not even covert. It's in the law.
It's in the law. But think about it. Jeff, a person like you didn't know that. So think about the average American person. Yeah. They can put it in the law. Nobody knew about it. I didn't know about it until I started reviewing all these documents.
And you're in command of so many of the forces.
Yeah, exactly.
Incredible.
Yeah,
wow.
Exactly.
So let's go on. You're reading this thing and you're seeing they're happy after 9/11 in the sense that now they can implement their plan.
We can implement the plan. There's justification there. After 9/11, the American people do not want to be hit on our homeland again. And we can justify it by saying that Saddam has weapons of mass destruction that could be used on the homeland. Not necessarily by him, but he can provide it to terrorists to ignite, WMD or in fact, even went as far as say a nuclear weapon on our homeland. So, of course, that's going to scare the American people, especially something after 9/11.
Scare the wits out of them.
Exactly. And so that's unfortunate. That's what our government was doing at the time to justify it. Now, let's get to the meat of this when you talk about how it aligns with what's going on in the world today.
Actually, before we get there, because it's so fascinating, the leaders of this effort, I assume Cheney, Rumsfeld, Feith, Wolfowitz was still around, or had he gone to the World Bank by then?
He had not gone to the World Bank as of yet then. Yeah, he was right in the middle of everything during that time. Yeah.
And Pearl, this is already, I'll use the term cabal.
Use it.
But this is a group. This is a group that had an agenda coming into power in 2001, they were the leaders of the Project for the New American Century. I don't know if we could just back up for PNAC. Yeah, and
Yes.
if we could just back up for one moment, this is a group that's come into power with an agenda. And they actually declared the agenda in rebuilding America's defenses in the year 2000. They said, this is what we're going to do. And if you could just describe that a little bit, and then I want to get to, you have a wonderful description of the claims of why we might have gone in and,
exactly.
and what you think it is. And I want to get to that. But first, I want to put this Project for a New American Century before us. It's a little bit reversing the order of the book because you come to the neocons. But let's start with this. This is a cabal or a group that inserts themselves into U.S. policy. It's not the Pentagon. It is the Pentagon, but the political, not the military. This isn't driven by the military. This is a group that comes into power with Bush Jr., and they have an agenda, and they've described the agenda. The agenda is a little bit terrifying in my mind, but why don't you describe what they had in mind?
What Jeff, I'm glad you mentioned that because of the fact you mentioned 1998. But actually, this goes back all the way to 1991.
Oh, God.
When Paul Wolfowitz was Undersecretary of Defense under Cheney at the time. And in the Pentagon, we have what's called, what we do every year, a defense planning guidance. And Paul Wolfowitz, back in 1991, came up with defense planning guidance. And that was the start of what you call the PNAC and the neocons playbook. He proposed to Cheney
yeah, Cheney was Secretary of
he was Secretary of Defense
in 1991.
And Colin Powell was the chairman at the time. And he had recommended to them the defense planning guidance should be that, hey, we should have imperialistic views of the world, that we should be able to have no rival. We can go into the Middle East, we can go into Europe and do as we please because we are the exceptional country. This was Wolfowitz planning at the time to be able to go into the Middle East at any time we wanted to go in. But guess what? Believe it or not, Cheney disregarded that and it never passed. Now, why do I say that? This goes over back. The neocons and the folks that was part of the PNAC, which no longer exist now, it's a long-term strategy. It goes all the way back to 91. Now, think about this. If you were planning something like that and proposed it to your leadership at the time, Paul Wolfowitz, think about when you become in charge, the number 2 guy at the defense. That's still part of your strategy. Now, unfortunately, you have a president that don't have that foreign policy experience at the time, President George Bush, and you're able to implement that plan. So it goes all the way back to 1991. And then all of a sudden, Wolfowitz comes into play. You have the PNAC strategy. You have the defense planning guidance strategy that Paul Wolfowitz had recommended, which was denied, believe it or not, by Cheney at the time. But long-term strategy. Now, you come into office. You have your agenda going all the way back to 1991 and 92. Also, the connections there. Doug Fike has always worked under Wolfowitz and been a mentor to him. Wolfowitz being a mentor to Doug Fike. That's how Doug Fike became the number 3 guy with the same mission, same goals, and same agenda. We're the dominant country in the world, and to meet our so-called, not the defense of our country, you always hear this keyword, the interest of our country.
Isn't it amazing, by the way, it's not our security. It's not our defense.
No.
It is the American interest.
Code word for being able, we can do everything we want to do.
Wow.
The interest. Unbelievable.
And if I could tell you just on a personal note, I had a weird experience in those years because I'm an economist and was a young, pretty good practitioner. And I was asked by Gorbachev or his team to help on the economic stabilization of what was, a collapsing situation. And then when the Soviet Union ended, I was asked by Yeltsin's economic team as prime minister to help on the economics. And I thought, wow, we have a chance for peace. The Cold War is over. We have a chance for peace. We should help these people because I'm listening directly. I sat face to face with President Yeltsin, and he said, we want peace, we want cooperation, we want openness, we want democracy, we want to be a normal country. That's exactly how he put it. And in the meantime, we're saying inside the bowels of the U.S. government, we will dominate the world and do as we want. It was
Exactly.
unbelievable difference. I didn't know it at the time. I said, sure, the U.S. will help. This was one of my most naive ideas possible. We didn't want to help. We wanted to dominate.
Look, I hate to, of course, to digress, but we want to stay on the book and the mission at hand right now. But going back what you just said, when I said my unbelievable career, I was part of, when the wall came down, I went on a congressional delegation. I went on two different, Senate and a House. One led by Steny Hoyer at the time, and then one by the late Lord Benson. You heard me mention about Lord Benson in the book. And we went over, we were following Secretary Baker around, who was Secretary of State at the time, and going over we were in East Germany, went to Germany, and talking to all those countries about, hey, we would not expand NATO. I was on congressional. I was on congressional.
Yep.
I wasn't with Secretary Baker, but we were just circling.
Yep.
You have the you have the administration, then you have the legislature. And so I was on two CODELs, one with Steny Hoyer and one with, as I mentioned earlier, Senator Benson.
Yeah.
And the Soviets wanted peace. Part of the agreement, the reason we went to Germany, they agreed to give us East Germany.
Yeah,
exactly. What I'm saying? They agreed.
I was around there in those days, and Baker said not 1 inch eastward to Gorbachev, to his face on February 9th, 1990. It wasn't ambiguous. It was as clear as could be.
Exactly. And once again...
Well, and you were there. Oh, we have so much to talk about. This got me hours.
Well, let me just say this. We said I was there. I was able to knock it down part of the wall. I'm mad at myself right now because when I came back, I gave pieces of the wall away. I didn't keep none for myself.
Wow.
Crazy me.
Wow.
But I didn't understand the historical significance at the time, of the wall, though. I'm just out there children, and it was just unbelievable. But when you go back to that, think about what I just said. And that was meant for the Soviet Union, then Russians. We were going to have unquestioned military superiority. And that was, we were giving the Russians, then, Soviet Union, then Russia, hints there that, hey, we're still going to be the dominant, force around the world. And as you stated, Gorbachev and Yeltsin, they wanted peace. And in fact, I'm sure you know this too, they even talked about wanting to be a part of NATO.
Absolutely.
Because we wanted superiority. So I digress, but we can talk about that on a later date. But let me get back to what's at hand here.
Let's jump up to 2003, because, you beautifully described, some people say it's oil, some people say it's WMD, some people say, and then you lay out, I think, so convincingly. But of course, you have the documents, the records, the statements, the purpose. So tell us, why did we go to war?
Yeah. And when you say that, Jeff, what bothered me most? First of all, we're talking about, senior people that most general officers, as I talk to them now, even I knew that didn't know why, the true reason why we went to war. Think about that. But what bothered me most is I went around to different military installations in the Washington, D.C. area. I grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina, home of, at the time, Fort Bragg, now Fort Liberty. And I would go around and ask the troops, why do you think we went to war? None of them knew. Well, I heard it was about oil. I heard it was about, revenge for the president's father. When you go to war, you got to have a mission. The troops are putting their lives on the line. And they didn't know the true reason of why they went to war. But what really tore me up, Jeff, you'll see in the book as well, before we went to war, I mentioned to General Myers and my boss at the time that if we go to war, and growing up around Fayetteville, North Carolina, I saw the results of the Vietnam War, the folks coming back. We didn't know what post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, was at the time. I saw many of that within my family who went off to war in Vietnam, but we didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And so I told Myers and a couple, I said, if we go to war, we better take care of our troops, especially when I knew at the time, that I had reservations about it, but I didn't know the true reason that WMD was a lie or fabricated. I left the Pentagon in 2008 at the request of an old boss of mine. Said, hey, they had a Washington Post story back in 2007, the treatment of our war wounded at the old Walter Reed in Washington, D.C. And they asked me, the Air Force, because, I had a lot of jobs at the senior level position, to go over to Walter Reed and take care of our war wounded.
Wow.
And as I was at Walter Reed,
amazing. And that must have been such a heartbreaking job also.
people ask me, how did I do it?
I don't know.
I saw some of the most severe wounds you could ever imagine. I saw where they were using old treatment. I walk into a room where I see leeches all over the stomach of an individual, and I'm wondering, what is going on there? That was to help, treat infections and all that. I saw triple amputation. I saw kids that only thing that the torso they had left was, everything below, the legs was gone.
Yeah.
Now, that tore me up, Jeff, because of the fact, hey, they had no idea why they went to war.
Yep.
Even the scene. So I was more focused on the troops. And that's what drove me to write the book. But I would ask them, do you know why? Oh, that was above my pay grade. Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk about why we went to war. I had I think in your area, an individual from the New York Journal, I've only had 2 bad critiques about the book. I thought I was going to get my critiques from people like yourself, Jeff, academia, talking about citations and all that. I had no goal worried about citations. I knew a lot of them would be redacted, as you saw in the book.
By the way, just for people to understand, look at this. This is a page. I just, I was trying to look underneath the redaction because some of it, and maybe I don't want to take it away, but I'm sure that this is not national security. It's just embarrassment.
It's embarrassment, and that is not right. You cannot declassify or classify something just for embarrassment.
Exactly.
I'll just tell you this. Part of the, and like I said, I worked on the declassification. I know what's declassified and what shouldn't be declassified. And so I wrote the book based on declassifications.
I'm sure. I am sure you did that utterly, and you must have looked at every one of these redactions and said, are you kidding? Are you kidding?
I shouldn't tell this secret. I got to be careful here. But
you be careful, but I do want to know because I'm sure, because sometimes you could kind of tell from the next paragraph, but look at that. There's so much truth in this book, but I could tell from reading that it's just embarrassing someone's name is mentioned,
That's what I was going to tell you that. That's what it is. It's like some of the meetings they had, like some of the folks, remember I mentioned like Richard Pearl, right. He's what you call an informal advisor. Even Newt Gingrich. These folks will run out of the Pentagon. Hey, you ready for this? I hate to hit you on this one. Some AIPAC members that was running in and out of the Pentagon.
No, don't tell me. So let's get to why did we go to war? And then I want to ask you, how can our government be organized this way? So please, let's get to what you learned, because it is the bottom line, and it's amazing and so clearly put, Dennis. And we just owe you so much for the clarity.
Well, I appreciate that. Like I said, I'm just happy, just like I said, hearing that from a person like yourself. But let me just mention this. Everything starts with a doctrine, agendas, as we talked about the PNAC earlier on. Yeah. So when I told you they first came into office about, we're going to war with Iraq, under the old Clinton administration, we had a regime change policy. They didn't implement it, execute it. So we're going to do it. Why? Because we're the leader of the world. We should be able to do as we please. And so what they're thinking when they first originally came in, I'm so glad you mentioned the PNAC. It was from that PNAC thinking, that, hey, we should have dominance. And if we say that, hey, we should have regime change in Iraq, then we should do it. So the first reason is they set up their strategy, and their doctrine was that gives us justification to go into Iraq based on our doctrine of being the dominant country of the world. Now let's get to the meat of thing, how it ties into.
Before we get that, can I just ask you one question? Because I use the term, and I want to know whether it's actually used, but full spectrum dominance. Is that a true military doctrine that is used? Because I'm told the Defense Department used the term full spectrum dominance, meaning in every sphere, in every technology, in every dimension of military, and in every region of the world, we should be dominant.
Oh, that's true. That's part of the doctrine. We should be.
Yeah.
It's indoctrination too of our military and all that of being dominant. I mean, it's part of. You've heard this term. I know the Chinese use it quite a bit. America's exceptionalism.
Yeah.
You know, people really believe that. Now, I tell you, there's so much we could talk about, but see, that was what Rumsfeld truly believed in. I would call that part of Rumsfeld's doctrine. But going back to the reason we went to war, you know, I had one critic to say, hey, he gave a number of reasons why we went to war. Well, yes, we did. There was 3 primary reasons. Each had their own agenda. And I hate to, you know, like I said, Wolfowitz, Pearl, and Fight, you know, I hate to say this, but it was primarily about Israel, okay? It was primarily about Israel. And going back to what you just said about dominance, that was Rumsfeld's philosophy. All of them had agendas, you know? So they put those agendas to get everyone's agenda. This is what we're going to do to reach everyone's agenda, okay? Now, the primary reason how it ties into what's going on right now. Bibi Netanyahu has always wanted, unfortunately, to do what he's doing right now in Gaza and then now in Lebanon. But because of the fact you had so many neocons and so many Zionists, quite frankly, in the Pentagon at the time, they were decided to come up with this plan to protect Israel by saying, hey, we're going to go to war on your behalf. We cannot go in and fight an urban war because we would kill too many civilians. We can't allow you to do that, Bibi. And we can't do that because we couldn't take the pushback from the world if we go in and started killing innocent civilians. So what are we going to do? We're going to take out the leadership of the 3 primary countries that support Hamas and Hezbollah. And we're going.
By the way, you know, Dennis, if I may say, just to interrupt you, when I was reading, and there you say fighting Hamas and Hezbollah, exactly what's happening this moment.
Right.
And you're talking about 2003. Oh my God, this agenda has been around for more than 20 years, actually more than 30 years.
Long-term strategy.
You nailed it. Exactly. And this Hamas, Hezbollah focus, this is how we're in the Iraq War of 2003, not today's headlines, which is exactly the same thing, but the Iraq War. Unbelievable.
Was all part of what's going on now, except it was felt that we could not do what Bibi is doing right now, killing the innocent women and children. Bibi wanted to do that back then, but we said, no, we got the plan. And believe it or not, Bibi's contact, I think he was the finance minister at the time, but he was still part of the Likud party, still part of the decision-making and so forth. His primary contact was none other than Doug Feith. And Doug bragged about that.
God.
He bragged about that, the relationship they had. So he was keeping the 2 countries that do exactly what we were doing was Israel and the UK. They were in cahoots with us. They were the only 2 countries. France and Germany, believe it or not, was against the war, what we were trying to do. And you'll read part of that in the book, you know, how they kept a lot of stuff away from France and Germany, you know.
Can I ask you a question about the UK? Because you've probably seen this. I find the UK, I'm so mad at the UK government in general over the years because they're even more warmongering than these neocons.
Unbelievable.
They seem to love war, and it seems this imperial delusion of theirs. And I don't know whether it is just that from a foreign policy point of view, they'll do whatever the U.S. says, but it seems to be more than that. They want to provoke us into these horrible things, even more, like as if the British Empire now continues, but with the U.S. military enforcing it.
Jeff, you're on it again. Here's what I can tell you. I want you to think about going back into history. It's in their DNA. We are part of the United States of America coming over here. It's in DNA. You follow what I'm saying?
I know.
It originated in the UK. You know, look around the world. UK and France, the dominance of the world. So that's why, I mean, it's almost like I tell folks, those of us, I played basketball, like we live our dream through our kids. I didn't make it to the NBA, but I hope my son make it to the NBA. Well, UK, we lost that prestige, but our kids, the United States of America that came from us, they're part of family, the DNA.
There you go.
Yeah.
So 2003, we're gonna take out Iraq. We're going to take out Iran, which has been a goal, even a bigger goal, which they can't quite land, but they want that war to this moment. And Syria.
What say that? Let me just share this with you now. Remember, I said they felt they had justification. When I mentioned about Bibi and the relationship between Bibi and fight, Israel wanted us to go after Syria and Iran first, because they felt that, they provided the most support to Hamas and Hezbollah. But the Bush administration and the neocons within the Pentagon said, no. We're going to go after Iraq first because we have a regime policy and we can justify it because we have law again. Remember, law again, a regime policy change. We had law on our side. You follow me?
Oh, I follow you, but it's surrealistic. It's beyond imagining that this was the legal way to do it.
Exactly. Now, Syria was going to be next. And they had already started, embarking and talking about, okay, we're coming after you next. Why? Because Syria allegedly had chemical weapons. So we're going to go after them. Mm-hmm. But what stopped that was the insurgency. They never counted on the insurgency. And that's what stopped them from going into Syria. They got tied down in Iraq with the insurgency. Now, the other part, and then later on, you'll know in this history, Russia came in support of Assad, and that really put the blame. Even though we have troops right now illegally in northern Syria, once again, it's our dominance. We can do as we please. We should have no reason to have. Go ahead.
Obama did sign Operation Timber Sycamore to overthrow the Syrian government.
I am so mad on Obama in that regard. I like Obama, but his sport, because in fact, if you look in the book, it's talk about credibility and strength. You can't be weak. He got so into that, doing that. Remember that red line he had mentioned about if they have chemical weapons, we would attack. First of all, what business if they use chemical weapons? I thought that was a false flag anyway. You think
that's what I'm told by Ted Postel at MIT and others.
Yeah, I'll tell you about. I'll keep that. But false flag. Just remember that. Okay. All right. And but anyway, that's why. Obama did that because he got caught up in the Washington D.C. think tanks sponsored by the military-industrial complex, like you said in some academia world. To say, we have to go in and take out, Assad. But he never did because he came to his senses. He never did. Now, let me tell you about Iran. We are afraid of Iran, and that's why we were saving them for last. We thought that we could do it. And I say we because I'm part of the United States of America. I wasn't part of the decision-making, but I'm talking about the United States of America.
I hear you.
Yeah. We were scared of Iran because of the fact of their not nuclear, but their ballistic missile systems. They have some ballistic missiles. That was part of the Iran nuclear deal. That's why a lot of neocons and conservatives didn't like the Iran nuclear deal because as part of the deal, we wanted Iran to give up their I keep saying nuclear, but their ballistic missile system. That's their lifeline, and they're very powerful. They're not rockets, they're ballistic missiles, okay? And so we were scared to attack them. So how we were going to do Iran, we were going to try to do it with exiles and internally, and try to bring them down.
Regime change, internal overthrow.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so now, how does that tie into today?
Well, before we get there,
yes, sir.
And we'll finish there. But and thank you so much. You're clarifying so many things. I want to understand one thing. Yes, it's true. You have the vice president on side. You have the defense secretary on side. You have this really a cabal. I'm going to use the phrase that it's Wolfowitz, it's Feith, it's Pearl, and knowing these people, I don't know. I know one of them rather well. I wouldn't turn my back to trust them for anything. Still, how can even this group mobilize the vast power of the United States for their illegal, illicit misguided purposes. There's the Joint Chiefs of Staff, there's the diplomats, there's the Congress, and so we're often asking, I'm often asking myself over my nearly 70 years of life and watching this, who runs the show in this? And how can a war be generated? Even these are, yes, senior people, but how do they mobilize a war after all? This is trillions of dollars. It's
Trillions.
It's professionals like you. Why isn't there a break inside the system that says, wait a minute, come on, we're not playing a board game, we're playing real life. This doesn't make sense, Doug.
Jeff, listen, when I started studying this stuff, I was amazed at what I found out. I will tell you, and you're going to be able to relate to this and understand this. Back then, I did a chapter on AIPAC. I did a chapter on, I talked about AIPAC quite a bit.
I recognized it.
Exactly. And I was surprised. My first thought, why are we going to war on behalf of another country? I've been years in the military. I was always taught we're defending our country, we're defending our Constitution. And I'm saying we're going to war. I said, how, as you just asked, how does this happen? So I started doing a study about this. And I'm looking at the Israeli lobby. I'm looking at the military-industrial complex. Like say, for instance, right now, we're talking about whether it be Israel or Ukraine. When we talk about the military-industrial complex, we brag about, hey, we gave Ukraine or we gave Israel billions of dollars, you know. We
Just this week.
Yeah, think about that. But think about the next step they said. But part of that requirement, part of that law, they have to spend that money and buy their weapons from U.S. manufacturers.
There you go.
The military-industrial complex are making money off from war. And then what do they do?
There you go.
And then what do? They turn around, along with the Israeli lobby, the military-industrial complex lobby, they provide money for the congressional campaigns, even the administration campaigns. And that's what the American people don't understand. That's why I wrote this book. That's why I'm on podcast. My goal is, now that I understand, is to educate as many of the American people as I can to show how this happens. Going back to your question.
And where does Zelensky go when he arrives in the United States? He goes to a factory.
A plant.
He goes to
a plant.
A contractor.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's a money game, ultimately. But then you have to put your people inside, and you make a conspiracy. You get Abe Schultzky to tell you the narrative, and there you go, off to war.
Now, let me get to your bigger one. I understand the administration, the political side of it, the administration, those that want power so bad, they'll take the campaign funds from the military-industrial complex and the lobbies and so forth. What breaks my heart are the senior uniformed general officers.
Yes.
That breaks my heart. Now, your question, how do they get tied up in this? Well, first of all, from day one as an officer, a career officer, they're taught about the civilian chain of command. They're indoctrinated. That's why the president's the commander-in-chief. As long as they don't feel it's illegal or unethical, we can give our say and then go from there and say, okay, if we don't think we can either resign or follow the orders. Okay, but Jeff, how about when they retire? Why don't they speak out? As part of my group, the Eisenhower Media Network, I've been trying to recruit GOs to speak out. They won't do it. Why they won't do it? How the military uniforms get caught up in it? Because they go out and be consultants to the military-industrial complex. They have to wait a few years, but then they've gone to be consultants, sit on the boards, of the military. And I'm looking at, it breaks my heart. Another reason, I asked a former chief of staff who didn't go that direction. He went to the academia world. And I asked him, why do these GOs do it? Knowing our troops that they led, why do they send them off to war and get on CNN and C-SPAN to talk about, warfare and all that versus talk about how do we get out of these wars? How do we promote peace and diplomacy? He said, they've been general officers all their lives. They want to remain relevant. So they do it for their own ego to remain relevant, and then being a part of the military-industrial complex, sitting on these boards, being consultants and so forth, and guess what? Making their money as part of the military-industrial complex. So that's how it happened. I hate to say it, it's all about the dollar, whether it be the military-industrial complex then because politics, those that in Congress, they want to stay in office, so they take that money. People don't give you money for nothing. Just like if you go to the store, you give money for a product. Where when the military industrial complex are giving money for your campaign, when the Israeli lobby is giving money to that campaign, they want something from that. And so
I want everyone to hear this, because we'll have $10 billion perhaps changing hands in this election. Nobody gives money for nothing.
Nothing.
Nobody gives money for nothing. Not the big money. Boy, that is absolutely for a trade, isn't it?
Unbelievable. But that's how this happened. Going back to your original question, that's how it happened. Even with the uniformed officers, it's corrupt. I hate to say that. It is corrupt, Jeff.
So I'm so thrilled to be speaking with you, and impressed with your leadership and your knowledge, and so many fascinating points that you're raising. Given where we are, can the American people come to understand what's happening? Is there a way to put a break on what seems to be endless and even spiraling wars right now?
Well, Jeff, I have the answer, and it's going to take. Whoa. That don't mean it's going to be successful. But I look back at South Africa, Mandela. I look back at the Vietnam War. I look at back when we had a draft, that some people, voted the draft because they had bone spurs or something like that, But I look at the draft and how these certain things were defeated. And I will tell you, and that's why we're demonizing them right now. I tell young people, they're going to make the difference, because my parents and people of I'm trying to convince right now, we've all been indoctrinated that America is the world superpower. I had a young man who used to work for me and said, Chief, I want the world to respect us again. I said, what do you mean by that? You've fallen into the talking point.
Yep.
Respect.
Wow.
I said, think about what you just said. You want somebody to respect us, so we can just go over the top because you want respect? But it's going to take people like you and me having these podcasts, because of the fact the mainstream media is not going to pick me up, and all that, because I'm going against.
Yep.
The thing. So they're not going to pick me up, but it's going to take. But going back to what I said, the young people, the peaceful protesting, there's something that get out of hand on the college campus. They've always been the one to change things. And so I'm supporting them. I've gone on podcasts. I'm supporting independent candidates, who understand that, hey, listen, we got to break this two-party monopoly, and a lot of people don't understand it. You're either in one corner. I'm either a Democrat, I'm either a Republican, but we have to educate the everyday people, and that is my goal. That's why I put myself out there. And surprisingly, when you asked me early on, hey, what do my colleagues, what do my peers who I served with, when I can look them in the eye and say, do you think it's right for 4,500 military members that we served with to have died, left their families? And oh, by the way, Jeff, we don't talk about the millions that have been wounded for life, who I worked with up until 22.
You've seen them. Yep.
I've seen it up and close, whether it be mentally or physically. Do you think that's right to let our government to lie like that? And oh, by the way, what's going on right now, I served in the military, and I tell my military peers right now, I say, think about this. From the time of basic military training for enlisted and for officer training, whether it be the academies or ROTC, we are taught about the Geneva Conventions. You don't bomb hospitals. You don't bomb schoolhouses, and you don't bomb residences. Israel is violating all that, and we're a part of that.
Absolutely.
Because we're providing
we know it,
weapons.
and
we know it's right before our eyes.
Exactly.
We know it. And why can't I get a general officer to come out and speak out against that? It's against not only our laws, but it's against international law.
Chief Dennis Fritz, you are providing magnificent leadership. You're doing it in the civilian part now. You did it in the Air Force. You have explained things to us with incredible clarity. The book we've been discussing, Deadly Betrayal. Please, everybody, read the book. It's so eye-opening, extremely important, based on the documentary history of the Iraq War, but it gives you chills because it's exactly about our day-to-day reality right now. Same motivations, same lies, same violence taking place in exactly the same places that motivated the 2003 Iraq War. So, Command Chief Dennis Fritz, let me thank you for your leadership. I'm going to be calling you for a lot of education from you on a lot of points. You've seen it all, and let me thank you so much for joining Book Club with Jeffrey Sachs.
Well, I thank you, Jeff. It's an honor to be with you, and I look forward to talking with you in the future.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.